What's up, Fox10 Fox here, and today we are reviewing the MSI Radeon R390. So the R390 is the GTX 1060's AMD counterpart. There is very few differences, however there is one big one, and that is the fact that the MSI Radeon R390 has 8 gigs of VRAM compared to the GTX 1060's 6. However, that doesn't mean that there's a huge difference between these two cards. The AMD one is going to perform slightly better than the 1060, but not by a marginal difference. So this one that I have here, the MSI version, has the twin Frozer coolers, a 1000 MHz core clock, 2560 stream processors, 6000 MHz of effective memory clock, and a 512 memory bit bus. However, the difference between these two cards is the heat. Before AMD was king of processors, they were king of the hotness. The R9 390 has a TDP of 275 watts, and it gets hot. AMD had to say that 95 degrees is an acceptable temperature for this graphics card, and in one of the benchmarks I did hit that before turning on the turning off the auto fan mode in MSI Afterburner and just cranking the fans up to 100% to stop it from getting so hot and throttling down. With that said, let's get into some benchmarks. So the hot one that I decided to test without turning off the MSI auto fan configuration was Watch Dogs Legion. With everything on high and medium, we saw an average of 49 FPS at 1080p. Although this card back in the day was touted as a good 1440p card, it is no longer a good 1440p card. This is definitely much more suited to 1080p gaming nowadays. Assassin's Creed Valhalla next, this time with the fan boost on. We were staying in the 60 degrees, which is pretty awesome. Again, 1920 by 1080 with the high settings, we saw an average of 43 frames per second with a 1% low of 31 FPS and a 0.1% low of 25 FPS. With the most demanding game of the day, Cyberpunk 2077, I was impressed to see 45 FPS on average. However, as always with Cyberpunk benchmarks, take it with a grain of salt. I wish they'd have an in-game benchmark that took you through Night City as well as outside. As you can see in the gameplay footage, I was outside in the, I don't even know what they call it, the Deadlands, I think, and we were running at a good 45 FPS, but I just know when I walk into Night City, the chances of that staying the same are very low. I'd say you're probably going to see mid-20s in Night City, so you're probably going to have to adjust some things below medium. Medium was the preset that we selected for Cyberpunk 2077, and it ran pretty well where I was. Just, you know how Cyberpunk is. Grand Theft Auto with everything on the high settings at 1080p ran at 62 FPS. Now this was GTA Online, which does mean that it's a bit more performance heavy, and anywhere you walk on the map will affect how it plays. For instance, if you were to walk into the casino, you'd probably see about 10 FPS less than this, but that's just how online works. This was just through going through the city and causing some car pileups and explosions and things like that, and we saw an average of 62 FPS, which is pretty good. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds next was very finicky. When you were in the starting arena, it would stay at 75 FPS, which was the monitor's refresh rate, even though I've got a 144 Hz monitor, but I'm not going to focus on that. But in actual gameplay, the 75 Hz cap didn't matter because we were only seeing about 62 to 66 FPS on average. 66 FPS was the return, so it wasn't bad, but there were parts that dipped below 60. So be wary of that, especially because it's an esports title. I did have it on everything on high, which means that you probably should turn some things down to medium for the best mix of frame rate and visuals. And finally, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. With RTX off and everything on the high settings, we saw an average of 68 FPS. So if you have an R9 390, you're probably doing just fine as long as you're a 1080p gamer. You're playing your favorite games at high settings with 60 FPS as long as they're older. Newer games you can turn down to probably medium and get 60 FPS. And it is still very much a capable 1080p card, and it's slightly more powerful than the GTX 1060. So as long as the 1060 is good, this card will be good. Funnily enough, this graphics card, this exact one that I tested, was my very first graphics card. I had an FX 8350 and an R9 390X. Now, this graphics card is actually my dad's graphics card because he doesn't play video games whatsoever, so he gets my hand-me-downs when it comes to graphics cards. That's where it's been sitting, but I remember using it so many years ago as a 1440p card, so it definitely brings back some memories to use it again, but it's definitely starting to rot on the shelf. It is no longer a 1440p gamer. It is down to a 1080p gamer, and it will soon be a 1080p 30 FPS type of graphics card, which is unfortunate. And I would not recommend buying one right now. Obviously, the graphics card market is insane, and you are going to pay way over the odds for this, and it just is not worth it. I think a 1060 is probably going to give you good enough results at a cheaper price, but look around. If you find one for this and you really want to get a graphics card that's capable of 1080p gaming, then I actually think this is a good option. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this video, like, subscribe, do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.